Welcome to MSUA's Game Changers Live, where we speak with satellite and mobile connectivity thought leaders about industry trends, new technologies, and share what you need to know about where satellite technology is headed in the future. I'm your host, Lisa Dreer. Our guest today is Brian Barnett. He is the founder and CEO of Solstar Space. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thanks, Lisa. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for making time to speak with us today.
Of course.
Perhaps you can start by just giving us a little bit of background on yourself and Solstar Space.
Sure. So, Solstar Space, we are focused on a particular niche, which is space-to-space communications using satellites to do that, commercial satellites for space-to-space communications, as well as very innovative ways of communicating from space assets to Earth, and two ways. So we are building terminals, satellite terminals, to actually integrate on spacecraft before they're launched, and that's the people in the MSUA in this industry understand what we're talking about in terms of developing terminals. And so it's very similar to the satellite phone devices and the satellite modems that we sell for applications here on Earth and on aircraft. And so Solstar decided, for better or worse, to focus on this exciting application of providing satellite communications for people and things in space and connecting the people on the ground who own those assets to them 24/7.
Wow. So I imagine that as space is becoming more and more congested with new LEO constellations, this will become increasingly important.
Yes, we've been working on this for a long time. So, and this is my third mobile satellite communications company, and I started in 1999. My first company was SatWest, and we became very active in selling satellite IoT devices and satellite phones for all of the verticals that we all in this industry address, and then started getting into aviation in the mid-2000s, had some pretty important customers, including Walmart, which has the largest fleet of Learjets in the world, and they wanted to have a voice comm for their pilot and wanted to track their Learjets over the internet, which for us today is very common to be able to track things over the internet. We can do that with commercial airliners all the time now, but back then it wasn't here yet. So we provided that solution to them. We also worked with NATO. And then my background you were asking about, so I actually started in the space industry, where I joined NASA Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama, and that's where I started my career. Wanted to start there, wanted to be an astronaut, and I was able to work with the astronauts, provided crew training to astronauts for space shuttle payloads, experiments, and Space Lab and International Space Station. I also worked at Johnson Space Center and worked in the same roles in terms of astronaut crew training and the Mission Operations Directorate. Then I joined a large consulting firm called KPMG Pete Marwick because I had an MBA and I wanted to be in the space business. So we started doing all these. Our customers asked us to do business plans and market assessments for these new constellations that were going to be launched that we all use today. So that was in the mid to late 90s. And so I started becoming aware of all these satellites that were getting ready to be launched in around the year 2000 timeframe, the most satellites ever and the most commercial satellites ever. So I thought that would be a good time for me to start my own company. And so that's why I left KPMG to start SatWest. And then, of course, in our industry, things got pretty, I guess, crazy is kind of a nice way to put it at the time, because everybody in my business plan, seriously, every single supplier in my initial business plan for SatWest had to file for bankruptcy or reorganization. So anyway, I treaded water for a couple of years until everybody came out, and then we could start selling products like the Iridium and Globalstar satellite phones, handsets, and then we started getting into Inmarsat as well. So we've been a service provider for Iridium, Globalstar, and Inmarsat for a real long time, and there's a number of emerging companies coming out here that are launching constellations, and of course we're right in the middle of that. And so we basically are specializing in figuring out which satellites we should be using for a particular space asset to provide for their humans on board, or payloads that we need to provide Wi-Fi to enable Wi-Fi enabled payloads. Then that's what we specialize in the industry.
Got it. Wow, what an amazing career. So with everything that you've seen over the years, what are you kind of keeping an eye on right now in terms of trends?
Well, I think all of us in this industry are waiting to see how everything falls out in terms of the new satellite constellations that have already started to be launched and are planned to be launched, and just to see how all that plays out and how it impacts the current suppliers. But regardless of how that occurs, we'll be using whatever satellites serve the purpose for our customers, including ones that we have already, and the new ones, and the ones that are coming in the future.
Sure. Well, we invited you here today to talk a little bit about the future of satellite mobile connectivity and what that looks like. So maybe we can start by just having you talk a little bit about what you feel is the most important role that the satellite industry has to play in the future of mobile connectivity.
Yeah, I feel like we're in a period of change right now. We're in a transition period because most of us in this industry have sold satellite handsets, the satellite phones, for a long time, for 20 years now. And so we still have those models, and then we have the new Wi-Fi hotspots, the mobile satellite hotspots, which I really like. And the market has changed because cellular coverage has gotten a lot better in that time period. And so, where I'm seeing activity still is like in building backup communications for hospitals and public utilities. That's what we're seeing now. And the consumer market, I'm still kind of to gauge in terms of where that's going. So I think that we are, my companies, we've always mainly focused on business and government customers. And so I think we're in a transition period to where those customers are, they're trying to figure out what they need in terms of backup communications. And then, of course, we have all these new players on the market that are covering the planet with connectivity, like Starlink. And so, a lot of us have been doing this for a long time. So there's just these new services that are coming to play, and we just are kind of monitoring that to see how that all comes to being.
Yeah. So actually thinking about that, what would you say from a user perspective? And when I say user, I mean a business and, enterprise user, government, military user. What are some of the things they really need to be considering, or the criteria they need to put in place as they're talking with service providers?
Well, so I think, they still buy handsets, the military does. And I just think that we need to become pretty innovative right now. I feel like we're trying to figure that out. And so I think that's the best thing that we as an industry need to be doing, is trying to really understand what the users need right now. And so the users is a very important part of this organization, right? MSUA. So I really feel that's what's happening now.
Yeah. Okay. So when you look at the new technologies that are coming into the marketplace right now, what are some of the things that people need to be looking at and learning about?
So, our specialty is space communications. So I'm just going to talk to that probably. That's what I know best currently. That's what I've been spending most of my time on. We started thinking about it. We wanted to see if we could use the same satellites that we use for people and things on Earth and on aircraft. Can we use those on spacecraft? So we started thinking about this over a decade ago, and myself and co-founders Mark Matosian and Michael Potter. And then we won a Space Act agreement with NASA in 2013, and to test this idea and then mature the technology if it worked. So we had our first flight in 2013. We flew out of Spaceport America. We had what we called a payload communicator on board, a rocket, and we wanted to see if we could connect to a satellite, from a rocket that's going 3,000 miles an hour, launched from this certain place in New Mexico up to a certain altitude, while the satellites that we were testing were flying at 17,000 miles an hour in a different orbit. And so we didn't know if this is going to work. So it did work. So
Wow.
we sent the first commercial text messages to a spacecraft using entirely commercial infrastructure, all the way from our commercial payload, which we paid for ourselves. NASA was kind enough to pay for our launches. Thank you, NASA. Flight Opportunities Program, thanks. So, and then we paid for everything else. So we've been investing in this for a long time. But we sent the first text messages to space from high school, Bosque High School in Albuquerque. So it worked, and then we moved on, and we kept on developing the technology, and then we've flown twice on Blue Origin's New Shepard spacecraft, and which is, by the way, going to fly people for the first time. I think July 14th, I think, is the publicly announced date that Jeff Bezos and his brother and some other Blue Origin employees get to fly. And so what we did using commercial satellites, we put a Wi-Fi hotspot. We had our satellite terminal, which we called the Schmidt Space Communicator. We name our products after astronauts. In this case, Harrison Schmidt, who was one of the last men to walk on the moon, and I got to work with for a couple of years, actually, pretty closely. But anyway, so we had a hotspot, the first ever commercial Wi-Fi hotspot inside of a spacecraft. And then we used our terminal we sent a tweet. We posted a tweet from our onboard computer via Wi-Fi to the satellite down to the internet. We had an internet connection using commercial satellites all the way from launch to landing on our second flight. So when you guys see this launch, when you see Jeff Bezos going up, then that's where we had our Wi-Fi hotspot to enable astronauts. This is the applications that I'm talking about. Providing communications for astronauts, for one, just the same things that we provide here on Earth using SATCOM, voice, Wi-Fi, and two-way data, as well as, like I said, things. So like if you have a payload inside of a spacecraft and you need to interact with it from the ground, like from our laptops that we're talking about now, anytime, or your cell phone, then if our space communicator is on board on that spacecraft, then we provide that connection to that thing. Just applying what we've done on Earth for a long time using satellite terminals, and just applying that in space. So we've flown 3 times in space, and there's a lot of applications there. Astronaut training, just being able to communicate with your expensive assets. So the idea is that you would integrate our space communicator on the ground as a component that's FCC certified and FAA certified if needed, and certified by the satellite operators as a certified product that can be bought by our customers, manufacturers of satellites or payload. People with payloads in space on the space station is another really great place to use our services. And then we provide the service too. So we're a service provider, and that would be great if that's all we needed to do is just sell airtime and provide customer service. But we also have to build the terminals because they don't exist yet. So that's where we are.
Wow, that sounds really exciting. I can imagine many applications for this. I mean, even medicine, like understanding how the astronauts' bodies are reacting to space flight, and maybe even in orbit. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, and there's 2 classes of astronauts now. You have the professional astronauts that through NASA and the other international space agencies. And in fact, they're actually going to start flying on these suborbital spacecraft for astronaut training. So, and there's serious things that go on to the human body when you're going into space and when you're staying in space. And so, medical applications is great with this, as well as if you think about it, we're going to have more and more regular people, quote unquote, flying into space. And wouldn't it be great to have monitor their health, test how they're doing in space, and be able to communicate with the flight surgeon on the ground during the flight. And if there are medical issues, then you have a commercial voice connection to talk to the space tourist, and kind of walk them through. Perhaps if they are feeling nauseous, or if in fact there is a medical emergency, then just having that communications on board is a very serious and important capability to have.
Yes, absolutely. And I can imagine also that the space tourists would love to be able to post to social media while they're in flight, right?
Exactly. That's the other
so
part,
serious,
right?
But
that's the stuff that gets headlines, and we've proved that we can do that. And so we can definitely enable that. And of course, that's a service. So we'll charge them for the data when they get back from the flight. But yeah, that's also the cool thing about this, is that besides the serious science and engineering, safety and backup communications, serious business for spacecraft, you can, of course, use our Wi-Fi hotspot for those things as well.
Yeah, for the not so serious things as well. So absolutely. Well, great. So we had a question come in, Brian, from Terry Trevino via LinkedIn, and he says, is your platform a laser-based communication system, surface to space and sat to sat?
Thank you for the question. We're not doing any laser communications yet. We are focused on RF, and that's, again, the assets are there currently in space, or their new ones are being launched. And so we're using commercial infrastructure to the highest extent possible. And so no, we're not using lasers, and we're using commercial infrastructure. So for our customers, it will be very similar. I mean, they'll be using their laptop from wherever they are. We take care of the rest. The customers should not have to worry about how they communicate, how that happens, because we take care of that. But just for us in the industry, we know how to use our, BGAN terminals, Wi-Fi hotspots by Iridium and Globalstar and others, and it will be very similar interface for our customers who need to interact with space assets or people in space.
Wow, that's amazing. The one thing that you mentioned that I thought was so interesting, and tell me if I'm wrong, but has it ever been possible to have those communications like that all the way from launch to orbit or suborbit and back to Earth?
Yes, that's done currently using government infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
So NASA uses the TDRS, the tracking and data relay satellites that were starting to be developed in the 80s to support the space shuttle.
Sure.
And now they're used to track, the space station, and then also the vehicles that are going up there, like SpaceX Dragon and Northrop Grumman's spaceship as well, and others, the international, the Russians, I think, use their own. But yeah, so the answer is yes, but that's been government until now. And so Solstar is trying to revolutionize that capability by using commercial infrastructure.
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. And also I imagine that this could provide some redundancy for those communication systems then.
Yeah, so backup communications, even if a spacecraft is using a government communication system, then we think it's really important that you should have a commercial backup. If eventually it will be your main form of communications, and of course everything has to be secure. So we understand that. But yes, backup communications. We think that certain missions could have been saved if they would have had a Solstar communications link on board.
Yeah, well, that is a great comment to end on. So, Brian, we would love to have you come back as the technology continues to progress and maybe do additional launches. And I really want to thank you for being here today and sharing your insights.
Thanks so much, Lisa. It's great talking to you.
Thanks so much. I also want to take a moment to thank the Mobile Satellite Users Association for hosting these sessions. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a guest on Game Changers Live, become a member of the MSUA, or receive the weekly newsletter, please visit msua.org. And we'll see you next time on Game Changers Live.